All righty, I guess, Brian, it's time that we get down to work here and talk a little bit about the wrestling now. And before we actively talk about the wrestling that's been perpetrated, let's talk about how the wrestling is created. See, I'm a poet and don't know it, but my feet show it because they're long fellas. There was an article in Rolling Stone, of all places. God, is everybody now sold their soul for wrestling instead of rock and roll?
Wrestling gets you clicks more than rock and roll does.
Well, I guess that's true these days. But anyway, they've done a story on the writer's room in the WWE. Apparently, they have their own room like Wally and Beaver. I wonder if they're sleeping in bunk beds. But the writer's room at the WWE, and specifically one former writer person. What were you going to say?
They didn't have a bunk bed.
Well, there's more writers than there was Wally and Beaver.
Well, that's true.
And how do you know what they were sleeping in when they were younger, before they went on the air and went Hollywood? They could have been sleeping in a chest of drawers.
That was them going Hollywood, having two beds?
Well, yeah.
All right. Well, let's go back to...
That was back in the 50s. You kept those kids in a compact area where you could keep an eye on them.
Well, let's go to the complete opposite of Hollywood, Stamford, Connecticut.
All right. Anyway, apparently there was a writer named Michael Leonardi who is mentioned here. A lot of the others are just a former writer or, unnamed people, but this guy, they lead off with him. He was fired in 2016 and told by an HR representative and the head writer at the time that he was not fit for the role. First of all, do we ever know who the actual head writer is? Do they publicly admit that?
Well, again, things may be a little bit different now than they were under Vince McMahon, but in the past, there were certain names that we knew. Brian Gewirtz, I believe would be one of them, right? He was the head writer after Vince Russo and Ed Ferrara. We knew their names. There wasn't really a writing team then. It was a smaller group of people. And then after that, it became, I think, Vince McMahon convinced himself with all the success they had that, we're making movies, that old bullshit line. And all of a sudden he had a team of writers who...
Yeah, but how many movies have 27 different writers?
Not many.
One guy wrote Rocky, right?
Stallone.
Yeah. So that's the point I was going to make as we get later on in this, is they say there's a room of, all these various writers. What they fucking writing, I don't know. But anyway, that's the thing, is it starts out with this guy getting fired, and he said, well, I'd gotten a promotion and a raise and positive feedback. He'd been there for 10 months. But then a week prior to his dismissal,
John Laurinaitis asked to sit on his face, and then there was a big problem.
What, did you say, sit or shit?
It's a WWE. Anything could happen in the WWE.
Anything could happen. Expect the unexpected. I certainly would expect that. But anyway, he says a week prior to his dismissal, he was dressed down by the company's then CEO, Vince McMahon, for making a last-minute minor change to a script that he and the other wrestlers thought was racially insensitive. And
other wrestlers, not other writers, other wrestlers. Okay.
Yes, other wrestlers. But then I'm trying to see, because this is a very long article, folks, and we're not going to read you everything, but I'm trying to see when they recount it in the body of the story. Here is where it is explained in the body of the article. During the taping of a Monday Night Raw segment that aired on Martin Luther King Jr. Day in 2016, he was producing On the Road with R-Truth, Titus O'Neil, and Mark Henry. And Neville is now Pac, is he not?
A bastard, yeah.
Well, now we don't need to be vulgar about it. But anyway, so as Leonardi described it, in a video he posted to LinkedIn this past February. So he put a video up about this on the internet?
For potential people to hire him, I guess. LinkedIn's where you go to try to find jobs and shit, don't you?
Well, then why is he talking about why he got fired? But anyway, He said the script called for Neville to speak up and tell everyone else that he's got a dream too, and that dream is to win the Royal Rumble. Referencing the civil rights leader's historic 1963 speech at the Lincoln Memorial. Leonardi says Neville told him he was uncomfortable delivering the line, and with a limited amount of time, there usually is, the bit was changed so that R-Truth said the line instead. And Mr. Leonardi says his boss at the time, Dave Kapoor, approved the change. Kapoor could not be reached for comment, neither Neville and R-Truth either. But anyway, after bringing the change to McMahon's attention, he says the boss became furious, and following their confrontation, Leonardi was let go. But a spokesperson for McMahon denied the account. And wait a minute, that's why the idea of him, wait a minute, the quote from McMahon's spokesperson, that's why the idea of him suggesting or approving the use of a famous Martin Luther King Jr. quote for a punchline to be used by a white British character is so ridiculous, it simply didn't happen. So that...
Well, but there's more to the story, because at the top, when they first started the story, again, it's in different parts of the Rolling Stone article, here's what Leonardi said. Vince McMahon turned to me and he said, "So you didn't give me what I wanted?" Leonardi tells Rolling Stone, "I said, I understand. I'm sorry. We all went over it and felt good about it. And we just made a small tweak." And then he started just yelling at me. It was such an intense moment. I walked out with my tail between my legs. So they're saying Vince didn't want it, and the proof is in the pudding. It wasn't on Vince's show. And this guy's saying there was a writer's mutiny because they thought it was so racially insensitive. Even Pac did. And Vince McMahon was upset about it not being used.
Well, but the funny thing to me was two things. Number one, that of all the blatantly outright offensive and horrible things, you know, he had people punt babies. I mean, of all the things that Vince had has done and said, or had done and had said by people, that this guy was you know, over this, right? It wasn't that fucking extreme. And secondly, there is something, Martin Luther King Jr. Day is a big deal to Vince McMahon. And if you notice, since the 90s, I don't know when they started doing it, every time that Monday Night Raw falls on that day, it's always on a Monday, but there's a graphic every year. And there's some type of recognition every year. And I bet you this was a thing like Vince got with other things, where it was in his mind that this is exactly the thing that needed to be done for this thing that means something to him. And somebody changed it, and whoa, boy, that ain't going to fucking fly with Vince McMahon.
However,
and
it's an awful idea. However,
right
it's an awful idea.
Many of Vince's were.
Having Pac say, "I have a dream" on Martin Luther King Day is a bad idea. Anyway, you slice it.
Well, or actually,
and he was a babyface, wasn't he?
Well, I assume with these other baby faces, but point being, whether good, bad, or indifferent, putting those things together, if they always say that Vince's personal ideas and his personal things, or his pet, those are the things that he cares the most about. Or if he wanted to produce LA Knight as a fucking male model manager company, whatever the fuck, personally, those are the ones that can get really fucked up, or he can get really mad over, is what he told somebody to do personally. So and this guy walked into it like a helicopter blade.
When you were working on the writing team, when you were helping book the show, was there ever a point where Vince reacted in any negative way because the same reason here, I didn't get what I wanted? Something like that someone else produced that was out of his hands, that he saw the finished product and he was, or something live that happened, just something where he didn't get what he wanted?
Oh, yes. Every show, you would see him, he would have the pen and he'd throw the pen down, or he'd look over the fucking glasses on his nose or whatever, or roll his eyes if he's sitting at the monitor watching. I mean, that happened to some degree, in every show, and it happens to everybody that's producing a show in every show. But here's the thing about the writer's room. And before I even say this, let's go a little bit further to just pick some things out of here that people are saying. The majority of the writers asked to remain anonymous out of fear of retribution from the WWE, their former colleagues, and rabid wrestling fans. Number one, what do they think? They were a writer on the WWE television program 5 or 10 years ago for fucking 6 months, and they're going to put a hit out on them?
You'll never get out. You're never out. You're always in.
Fear of retribution. If you're not currently
wanting your head.
If you're not currently in the wrestling business or want to be in the wrestling business again, and where would any of these writers go to stay in the fucking wrestling business? Nobody else wants goddamn miscellaneous fucking TV writers. But why would you be afraid of retribution? What are rabid wrestling fans going to do if you're a faceless person with a name of John Smith quoted in a Rolling Stone article? How are the wrestling fans going to track you down and take a stick to you? What?
Is this the producer of General Hospital? I'm just a fan. You better not hire George.
But anyway, no, here's one former writer tells Rolling Stone WWE is a kingdom ruled by fear. It is the motivating factor everywhere. Fear.
Now, that's not something only writers have said. That has been said a lot about the way Vince, especially in the later years, ruled WWE. That people walked on eggshells. Right? I mean, you've heard that before.
Yes. And, if again, you don't want to get heat with the boss, right? But I'm just talking my experiences. This is I know he went nuts. We established that. But my experiences are nothing like any of this. And I don't know what. I was in the writer's room, and I say that because we were writing. It was Vince's goddamn dining room on the table. But me and Vince and Bruce, or me and Vince and Bruce and Shitstain, or me and Vince and Bruce and Jim Ross. And, occasionally somebody might wander in like Pat Patterson or, whoever that would stop by.
Who just wandered in? Oh, it's Pat Patterson. Just wandering the streets.
Pat wasn't writing the TV at that point, but he would stop by when a pay-per-view was coming up and we were talking about finishes or something. Nevertheless, it was a group of between 3 and half a dozen people. And there was no, even with us, except for me and Shitstain, I don't remember any outright yelling, like, what the fuck? I remember people getting, enthusiastic and say, oh, come on, you really mean you don't think if he punches him in the face with a fucking toilet seat, that's great, whatever, right? But nobody was mad. Nobody was being personally belittled. Nobody was scared of anything. What the fuck? Frustrated, yes. Tired, yes. Burnout, yes. Mentally. Ready to do anything else but, yes. All those things I have felt, but not scared or bullied. And so I don't know.
You think Vince treats wrestling people differently than he would treat generic writers?
Well, but hold on here. Where is it that they got to stand up? God damn, this is a long article. I'm trying to. With the 6 writers who used to work at WWE tell Rolling Stone they regularly witnessed or were on the receiving end of verbal abuse. The allegedly hostile conditions permeated not just the writer's room, but the company in general. Everybody was getting yelled at all the time in the room. It was more saying shit that was humiliating or mean that was then couched as a joke, but it's a nasty joke. Now is somebody joking with somebody and they're just pissed off and they don't like it. But
Well, yeah, I mean, read the rest of the quote. If you're being targeted in a room, nobody stands up for you, but that's because if they do, they'll get the bullet in the head.
The bullet in the head, too.
You don't stick your head up out of the foxhole for anybody because nobody wants to take a bullet.
I don't.
Jesus.
Good Lord.
I had no idea it was so intense.
Well, and that's the thing. There's the quote that I was talking about was, it's a deal where the writers are told when Vince walks into the room, you've got to stand up. And you said, well, maybe it's not, it's wrestling people that he doesn't talk to like that. But no, number one, I never stood up when Vince came in the fucking room, and nobody ever told me to, and nobody ever asked me to. But I'm not even talking about the writer's room now. I've seen Vince in the general production meetings. I don't know how many, 3 in years, we had 2 a fucking week, hundreds of production meetings with the people that work at the studio, or the people that work in the office in Stamford, the old Titan Tower, but in different departments like marketing, or somebody that's going to be there to the event market reps that help sell the tickets and work with the buildings, regular employees, right? I don't remember anybody giving Vince a standing ovation when he walked in a fucking room. And in many of those cases, I was walking in the room with Vince because I was stuck in the car with him, and nobody fucking stood up for me either when I was behind Vince. I don't know what is going on here.
Well, according to the article here, well, actually, that's the way the paragraph begins. According to the former WWE writers who spoke to Rolling Stone, the TV writers' room was unlike any other they'd experienced. For one thing, the fact that McMahon himself, the CEO of a company of more than 800 people, regularly joined and supervised the small staff of writers. Around 20 to 25 people.
A small staff of writers, around 20 to 25.
Depending on whether the show is being produced at headquarters or on the road.
Good Lord.
There were also unconventional rules, including a formal...
Well, wait a minute. Hold on. What you just said. They thought that Vince McMahon was not going to be in charge of the booking of the WWE? How did they make it after the first 24 hours under that ridiculous assumption? What the fuck?
There were also unconventional rules, including a formal dress code. In a document detailing the dress code obtained by Rolling Stone, the company required men to wear suits and women to wear skirts, dresses, or pantsuits. In addition...
Okay, hold on.
No blue jeans!
Well, I've talked about this at the production meeting or at the arena, at the building, from the time you go in the arena till the time you come out. Yes, he wanted... Well, he didn't want suits either, but shirts, pants, a jacket. There were no women on the writing team at that point, thankfully. But any of the women that worked in the studio, again, I mean, they wore what they wore, but I don't remember anybody dressing like they were going to a goddamn board meeting at the office to go to television when you were on the production crew. But no, when we were writing the show, and again, we were at Vince was wearing a goddamn sweatshirt and sweatpants with his fucking hair all sideways because he just worked out for 2 hours before we got there at 9 o'clock in the morning. So I was sweatpantsing and fucking t-shirting it even at that point. But at the office or at the building, he wants you to perk up a bit.
Well, let me continue here.
Okay, well, you can.
In addition, all employees were instructed to keep their shoes shined at all times. Was that a rule when you were there?
Yeah, I didn't have shoes you could shine. I wore dress shoes for the first 2 months that I worked in the office, and with my flat feet, I got up in the morning and couldn't fucking put weight on them. So I went and got a brand of Nike hiking boots that looked like black high-top leather tennis shoes, and that's what I wore. And I wore those for the next 15 fucking years. They were comfy as fuck.
Do you think that's the reason there's the rules, the Jim Cornette incidents where he wouldn't?
Well, maybe maybe I caused this, but no. What I do? What? Okay, I don't know.
I shall continue. There were other policies the former writers say were atypical compared to entertainment industry standards. The writers allege they were told not to sneeze in front of McMahon because he saw it as a sign of weakness, and to always push their chairs in when they got up from a table.
Well, now that's just good manners.
Yeah, it's just manners. I don't know what the problem is there. Who's the jerk leaving their chair out? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, and we know about the sneezing thing, although that was actually, I've had a cold and sneezed the fuck out of Vince McMahon one day, trying to fucking illustrate to him how miserable I was and see if he would tell me to go. It was one of those deals where, well, Cornette, you think you can make it? I'll be okay, Vince. Trying to get him to say, just go home. But he wouldn't be the first one to crack.
That's one of the more underrated Vince's completely insane stories. The idea that, like, when he would sneeze in front of people, he would be like, oh, God damn it. He'd just get mad at himself for having a reaction that is involuntary. That's part of humanity. It's part of living. He's nuts. But anyway, I'll go back to this. The writers say they were also instructed to stand whenever McMahon walked into the room and to sit down only after he took his seat.
I think they used to write for the Pope, didn't they?
Yeah, really. Is this like Vince's courtroom fantasy? What is this? He's the judge?
And now, somebody say, oh, they're taking up for Vince. No, we're admitting that Vince McMahon is a very bizarre individual, but some of this stuff is not my experience. At least back in the day.
We have a quote from a Vince spokesperson. Many of the anonymous writers' claims bear no resemblance to the reality of the writer's room. Vince never told people to stand up when he entered the room. That's ludicrous. The former writers who spoke with Rolling Stone say that while they did not hear the directive from McMahon himself, they were instructed by their managers to follow this rule.
What do you think that Vince thought when one day out of the blue, all of a sudden it had never happened before, and he walks in the fucking production meeting or whatever, or the writer's room, and they all just stand up? Do you think that maybe he was like, well, I don't want to hurt their feelings. They're trying to show me respect, so he let them keep doing it? Because again...
And who's the managers? Is Bruce Pritchard the manager?
Well, I don't know.
Or was he?
Instructed by their managers. We didn't have fucking managers, for one thing, when I was there. Would JR, at the head of talent relations, would he have been managing us?
Most unorthodox of all was McMahon's direct say in the final scripts, the writers say. Until he stepped down as CEO and chairman of the company 2 years ago, McMahon was closely involved in every single script.
No shit, Sherlock.
The former writers describe a process that was hardly collaborative. Writers would pitch story ideas to lower-level supervisors and head writers. And, on days McMahon was in the room, directly to him. They would sometimes produce multiple versions of scripts. But ultimately, they say, McMahon changed storylines, even ones he previously approved, and entire scripts on the day of the taping. He, quote, destroyed everything by the time we got to air. Seemingly just to exert his dominance, one former writer says.
Again, please tell us something that we don't know. What, again, remember, I've called it the ceremonial turning in of the papers. Okay, we spent Wednesday, we talked about all these things, okay, now we do the formats, and we fucking take them back, and let's do this.
See, that can't be healthy for a writer. The idea that you're constantly submitting things and even collaborating with the person in charge on the ideas, and then like the day of, they're just like, fuck it, we'll do something else. Every week.
And now, to be honest, sometimes it was because one of the main players in on the talent roster had some issue back in those days, whether it be attitude issue or substance issue or whatever the fuck, but most of the time it's just Vince, well, let's do this, and this guy will do this over here, and blah, blah, blah. It just changed everything.
Another quote here. It doesn't really matter what he said in that creative room, or if he loved it at an earlier point. It was still going to get torn up before the show. By the time Monday rolled around and we were all in the production meeting, something else was going to happen. It almost felt like a joke. Like we were just there to satisfy Vince's whims. We were all Vince McMahon transcribers.
There you get. That's it. And that's the point I've been trying to make. And I've used 18 million words over the course of the years, but that's the best description. You don't take a job as the booker or even as a booker in the WWF. You at least maybe now you might, but then you didn't when Vince was around. You were a Vince McMahon transcriber. You started with his murder mystery, with him figuring out who was getting killed and who the fucking perpetrator was. And you filled in all the scenes where they used the fucking phone booth at the drugstore.
I think Vince enjoyed the manipulation. He liked changing things. He liked keeping people on their toes. I genuinely felt like this isn't to benefit the show or the storyline. Vince just really enjoys making people squirm.
Okay, here they've gone too far. Because no, it was always it's what Vince thinks will help the storyline or benefit the show. And he's changed his mind again, and he knew he was omnipotent, but he wasn't making the show potentially worse or just to make people squirm. That was not happening. It's just that he knew better than anybody else did, whether he did or not.
But still, knowing how he dealt with people, you don't think he was dealing with some of these writers and he enjoyed kind of fucking with them in a way?
Well, yeah, and I think also a lot of this is these are people who have apparently had normal jobs and or were kind of normal fucking boring people, and they don't get the fucking ribbage that goes on in the wrestling business. I'm not even talking about from Vince, but I just think if Michael Hayes or even Bruce Pritchard or, anybody, I don't know who else is there that's ever actually been in the real wrestling business, are going to bust somebody's balls and they're not capable of coming back or don't feel comfortable with it because that's not what they did. And when they worked for Exxon or whatever the fuck, I can say, yeah, they probably wouldn't enjoy themselves. But if you fucking fire back and do the same goddamn thing, people leave you fucking alone, or they just continue to joust with you and you joust back with them.
But again, things are probably a lot different today, and Vince is a lot different today, the last 10 years or so, than when you were there. Here's another example.
Well, this is coming up, yes.
Writers say it was commonplace to wait around the Stamford office late into the night for McMahon to show up to their scheduled meetings about that week's scripts. One former writer says they would often wait for hours and you wouldn't know why you were waiting. The writers claim meetings sometimes did not start until midnight and did not wrap until 2, 3, or 4 in the morning.
See, this...
And Vince McMahon's spokesperson basically confirmed it and said this is part of working in the entertainment industry. Long hours, crazy days, but that's very different than you and what you experienced.
Well, yeah, and this is what surprises me because, yes, Vince could be late if he was already in another meeting or on the phone with somebody. I've talked about a million times. You'd be sitting around waiting for him to get off the fucking phone, but you had already started. He wanted you there at 9 o'clock in the morning on Wednesday and at his house. And as I've mentioned, in Connecticut, that required you to leave from where I lived 40 miles away at about 7 o'clock, 2 hours on that goddamn miserable highway.
You missed the Merritt Parkway?
Oh, fuck. Yeah, I'd like to fucking miss it for the rest of my life. But anyway, when I would roll in about 9:20, I would get the goddamn glasses on the end of the nose and fucking look at the watch or whatever. And I guess this fucking traffic, it's insane. You people live here on purpose. What the fuck? But, no. And yes, that was his house. But if you showed up for a goddamn meeting at the fucking office 15 minutes late, he was going to be sitting there at the head of the table or wherever he was, the meeting was happening, and you were going to wither and die at the glance that he gave you on the way in. And
another big difference between what this story's talking about and when you were there, Linda was around.
Yes, but goddamn, again, the production meetings. I have a feeling if you had to shit yourself and you were 5 minutes away from the building in a car, Vince would let you shit the upholstery rather than stop to be late to the fucking production meeting. Because it was my own company. Can't be late to my own meeting. And he was an early morning guy. All these things started in the morning. We were at the studio in some cases till midnight, but that's because we were doing a live television broadcast. Like the voiceovers for the show. Remember, I've talked about that, how to make it more topical. When Raw was first transitioning to live every week, they would have the show taped, but we would do the commentary live in the studio on the feed. And that way we could talk about what happened that day. Big fucking whoopty shit, I know, but they were convinced that made a difference. So we'd be at the office all goddamn day. And then we'd go over to the studio and wait for 9 o'clock to roll around. So we would be, but he would have been working the whole day. He never started shit at midnight because he'd been working since 7 o'clock that morning. So I don't know what the fuck is going on here now.
It wasn't just McMahon who was the problem, the former writers say. One former writer says that while they didn't have any negative experiences with McMahon directly, they thought the other writers in the room who were in positions of power could be bullies, motivated by fear of upsetting McMahon and losing their jobs. Those who demonstrated this type of loyalty to McMahon tended to be avid fans of wrestling who spent their careers inside the world of WWE, the writers say.
Well,
now that's interesting.
Avid fans of wrestling, or...
Is that Bruce?
See, that's what I'm saying. I don't think you could call either Bruce or Michael Hayes avid fans of wrestling first and foremost, but instead of, veterans or professionals or whatever. Are they talking about, was there a section of the writers that were actually fans of the business and another section like that Alexandra Pepperday that had never fucking seen wrestling before and didn't know shit from apple butter about what it was about? And there was a divide there. I can see that. But again, bullying amongst the writers in the writer's room because they're jealous of the other fucking guy or whatever. Well, there's too many of them, for one thing. And secondly, who is this scared of losing a job that's apparently this miserable?
Well, speaking of that term miserable, let me continue on about the miserable people in charge.
Okay.
Those people were the most miserable people I've ever worked with. But that's where a lot of them had worked their whole professional lives, and that's the only game in town. They didn't know what it was like working on a regular television show. One former writer claims they witnessed a colleague in a leadership position tell another writer something to the extent of, "I wish your dad pulled out and came on your mom's tits instead of having you."
That sounds like Michael Hayes. That sounds like a Michael Hayes. Oh, he was, and if you responded, well, he was saving the good shit for your mother. What the fuck? God damn it.
Yeah, that's the thing. To something like that, you respond, you jab them back. It's words. Come on. This was like good old boys locker room talk, the former writer says. The more somebody was promoted and the closer they got to the innermost circle, the more volatile it got. And the more you dealt with some of those good old boys. That's absolutely Michael Hayes and Bruce and Maybe someone else we're not thinking of, but
I'm trying to think of who is a legitimate wrestling personality and has ever actually been in the real business and is on the writing team in the WWE, because the producers that used to be wrestlers, they don't get in the writers' room, do they?
I don't think so.
Or not considered writers. So what? But
what if the joke's on us and it was Stephanie?
What? one of the writers compares the WWE writers' room culture to a mafia style of leadership in which if you do one thing, you're pissing off 3 other people who are higher up than you, who are going to chew you out and get angry and seek revenge. But I couldn't understand what the hell was going on because nobody made eye contact. Nobody talked to you. It was so odd. Everybody's scared, and the only laughs are at someone else's expense. Everybody is emotionally shut down because of the verbal beating that they take and the humiliation. I mean, if Vince pushed me in a swimming pool one time. Is that considered bullying? But that's happened. Everybody got pushed in the pool, but only once. Once you had your dip in the pool, then it was on to other people.
Didn't Shane get Vince?
Shane got Vince one time, yes, I think. But and see, that's the thing. They had a routine that they would work people with. Like Bruce got me because we were sitting out by the pool one day, and I can't remember how it came up or how he presented it, but Bruce was dead serious that there was something. Vince had something written on the bottom of the pool that coincided with some fucking big show or something. I said, I don't see anything. He said, no, if you look close, it's right in the middle. And I'm like, I don't see it. And that's how they get you to get closer to the fucking pool and they shove you in or whatever. But again, why is everybody so scared if they're so miserable? And I'll say, hey, you know what? Fire me. Because I'll tell you what, I was treated the best and, pretty much acknowledged in my complaints the times that I said, you know what, I can be fucking back in Tennessee in 12 hours. Tell me now so that I can gas up my car.
The famous thing where you yelled at Kevin Dunn in the meeting.
Yes.
And told him about his teeth, which caused him to later cry.
Yes.
Vince was there when that happened, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is an example of a writer's room, technically. You didn't call it
Well, no, that was a production meeting.
Okay, but there's an example of something Vince is supervising, and there is some sort of... Like, how did he react as it was happening in real time?
Well, remember, as I said, everybody that was in the room, and it would have been me and Bruce, and Shitstain would have been there, and Vince, and I think Shane was there, Kevin Dunn, Jim Ross, a couple people from the studio, a couple more people. The only one that didn't start smiling when I first said it was JR because he knew that I was mad from the start. Everybody else thought I was going to bust into some entertaining something. But then when I finished standing up and uttered the words, I will drag you over this desk and beat the fuck out of you, then everybody's expression soured. But nobody had any time to say anything because that's when I fucking closed up my fucking shit and threw it in my goddamn briefcase and said, if anybody wants to talk about the wrestling show, I'll be in my room. You guys continue on, and fucking left. And then they let me stew. And then, as I've recounted before, Vince, you know what?
What did he say to you? That's kind of my point.
Well, I'm trying to think the next day. Because I know that I'm trying to say that he wanted me to apologize to Kevin Dunn, but that was at his house the following Wednesday or whatever. But maybe it was at the show then, but I didn't. The point being, I didn't speak to Kevin Dunn. That was a Saturday night. The pay-per-view was on a Sunday night. We did TV, I believe, on a Monday. That may have been before we were doing live TV every week, so we might have done a taping on Tuesday also. But when we got back to Stamford, Vince arranged it where Kevin Dunn could come over to his house so that me and Kevin could sit there privately and I could tell him I was sorry for insulting his teeth.
Oh,
Because
I never realized it happened at the house. I thought you guys ended up meeting at the office.
no,
Huh.
he had Kevin come over to the fucking house. And the way that, again, Vince's Jedi mind tricks, I wanted to apologize to this motherfucker like I wanted to cut my right fucking arm off. But Vince said, he's important to the company. He's been here a long time and he's very sensitive and you've hurt his feelings. I said, well, he fucking hurt mine too, but nevertheless, if it means this much to everybody, I'll apologize. So I was going to go through the fucking motions, which I kind of still did, until the fucker started crying and talking to me about how the kids used to make fun of his teeth when he was in school. But then I was thinking, you make hundreds of thousands of dollars. This was before the stock deal. You make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, get your fucking teeth fixed. But nevertheless, but no, that's, that was pretty much in my experience of being there for 3 years, the most heated or aggressive that any meeting ever fucking got. And, and again, I never felt scared, frustrated, fed up, pissed off, burnt out, all of those things. But scared of reprisals. I'm not sure what the fuck's going on here.
Yeah, I mean, the only reprisal is you're fired. I mean, really, at the end of the day, that's it. They're not going to follow you home and kill you.
I said, well, that's what they said. They're already ex-employees scared of retribution. Of what? They got a hitman on call? Is that what Howie the mailroom guy is doing now? Go to this guy's house, kick the shit out of him.
Yeah, I'm afraid of retribution because Vince McMahon and his good reputation will call someone up and say that I was the problem. Yeah.
But anyway, would you like to delve into the former female writers' comments?
Oh, let me get to that. This is, again, it's a lot of stuff here and it's all very long. Here it is. Women in the WWE writers' room face specific challenges. Of the former writers who spoke with Rolling Stone, the women say they felt othered and became hyper-aware of their gender because of how they were treated by male writers. One former writer...
Okay, if they already don't know which gender they are and that they're the other gender from the other gender that's opposite them, then I'm not sure...
That is funny wording.
What's happening here?
Became hyper-aware. I always knew I was a girl, but now... I'm super aware that I'm a girl. One former writer says people would comment on her outfits and touch her in ways that felt unnecessary, even though the behaviors weren't explicitly sexual. She says that Swami will bark. She says it felt like a means of controlling her in a way that didn't happen to the men in the writer's room. Here's a quote. They would touch me where they would have me come closer to them. They would pull me by my waist to come somewhere or move closer to them. I'm just super aware that it's kind of close to my butt.
What?
And most people don't touch me by the waist ever. I thought, this is strange. And I have to say, she's not wrong. That is strange.
Yeah. And again,
especially if it's Bruce or Michael Hayes that we're talking about again, then it's creepy too.
And if you were Bruce, would you want to touch Michael Hayes by the waist or anything else? But, okay, again, there were no women writers, but there were women working in the production department in the studio. Jennifer Good was a producer there for years. She was at all the major meetings. She handled a lot of the shows. I don't remember anybody ever steering her around the room by her waist. So maybe this person should have said something about that person because, that doesn't sound kosher to me.
Well, I will continue here with this. 2 former writers tell Rolling Stone they took their complaints to Human Resources. One was subsequently fired from her position, a decision she interpreted as retaliation. According to former writers, enough female writers complained about their treatment to WWE HR in 2020 that leadership held a Zoom meeting they referred to as a woman's forum. in which the affected writers were encouraged to collectively air their grievances. One former writer says she grew emotional when she told everyone in the meeting that she didn't feel safe with her coworkers.
But the other writers are her.
Another woman who attended the meeting says the leadership staffers there were dismissive of women's claims. They did it just to appease us, but they didn't take it seriously at all. By the way, that's 2020. In terms of all the Vince and Janelle Grant stuff, that's right in the midst of it, isn't it?
It would seem to be.
So in terms of culture, in terms of the culture around Vince and Vince's enablers and everything else, you would have to think that's kind of like almost the end of this kind of shit, this period of whatever the fuck was going on, grabbing women by the waist to move them. Move here. What the fuck is that?
Move there. Again, I don't know what they started doing up there. But at the same time, here, continuing on, and I'll make this point, they say, one male senior staffer said, come see me if you have a problem. You people are acting like middle schoolers, whatever. There may be an element of all of this in there, but one former writer who says they have a history dealing with anxiety also says their mental health was impacted by their time working at WWE. They say they were allegedly driven to having crippling panic attacks because of the job. But when they brought the concerns to HR, nobody ever followed up or took any course of action. That maybe that's because you need to not do this job. If you are having a crippling attack because of the job you are doing, but the descriptioners, you're kind of getting yelled at, you don't, and I know I have a hard time, and I'm trying to sympathize with the writers, and you shouldn't be being steered around by your waist, but a lot of these people are talking about, well, the wrestling culture and the good old boy network and blah, blah, blah. They obviously don't have any motivation for being in the wrestling business. They got a job with the WWE because they're TV writers and they want to write a TV show. So if they're not in love with the business and under its spell, why are they putting up with this? And part of the problem with the product is that there are so many people that they have allowed to become writers that have never seen a goddamn wrestling show before. And I've been in contact with a few of those in my time. And the other side, the good old boys and the wrestling people, feel the same way about the writers. What a bunch of fucking nitwits. So that's what they've done. The company, if anything, has put two completely different kinds of groups of people in the same room and expect them to work together. And the regular TV writers think that the wrestling people are crazy, but the wrestling people think the TV writers are fucking idiots because they don't know anything about wrestling.
On the other hand, if it's Bruce or Michael Hayes that we're talking about who are saying, you're all acting like middle schoolers if they go to HR, trying to talk them out of going to HR, or come see me if you have a problem, one former writer alleges, which is such bullshit because he's part of the problem too. He enabled Vince with everything that he did. It was a really unhealthy last several years of Vince McMahon's run. And, the other thing is, this is coming out now. You would have to say this is not currently reflective of what's going on there in WWE. So it's kind of, we're talking about almost like a dead company or, a different regime. It's a different world altogether right now with WWE.
Well, yeah. And again, it was different when I was there, and it's different now that Vince is not there. But I don't see how things got to this point that people are walking down the hallway like, oh shit, somebody's going to fire me or yell at me. There was none of that. Yeah, again, everybody was always scared of Vince, but scared of Vince like you're normally scared of pissing the boss off, not like you're He's Don Corleone. And I think this is a combination of some people in that company apparently went fucking berserk when they became publicly traded. And a lot of these people don't need to be in the wrestling business. Both of these things can be true.
Tatalia's a pimp. What I didn't know until now was it was Triple H all along. Well, there it is, the topsy-turvy world of the writer's room under Vince McMahon, although, again, some of his enablers are still in the company, and Vince does still own stock, so it always makes you have to question if he does still have a voice in the room, if the people that were his voice in the room are still there. But that was that story.
That was that story, and I'll tell you what, by cracky, if you want to tell other people what the story is, you need a good phone plan, Brian.
Yes, you do.
Yes, you do. You need to tell anybody anything. You need a good phone plan. And Brian, guess what I got?
You got a good phone plan?
I got a good phone plan.
Well, it's about time.
Mint Mobile's phone plan, $15 a month. It's the cheapest it's not only the cheapest in town, it's the cheapest in the country. Now they may have one on the Arctic Circle that's cheaper than Mint Mobile's $15 a month phone plan. But who the fuck are you going to call in the Arctic Circle?
An explorer.
Admiral Peary, maybe. Or a cute little penguin. But if you are down anywhere below the Arctic Circle in this world and you want a great premium wireless plan that gives you high-speed data, unlimited talk and text, the nation's largest 5G network, and you can use your own phone, then go to mintmobile.com right now because they got the deal. As we mentioned, $15 a month. When you get the 3-month plans, that's $45, but that's just mathematics. And you will be able to call anybody, text anybody. As a matter of fact, I understand that you can not only call or text anybody, but Brian, now they can call and text you.
Well, yes, of course.
Well, you said, of course, like everybody's plan is like that.
Well, with Mint Mobile, everyone's plan is like that.
Well, with Mint Mobile, but not with everybody.
That's why you
not
should be
with some
Mint
of these
Mobile.
other people.
That's the point.
As a matter of fact, one of the other companies has a deal where you can only make phone calls on Tuesdays.
That sucks.
Well, yeah, think about the rest of the week. If your house catches on fire on a Wednesday morning, you're going to have to wait 6 days to call a fire department. You don't want to do that, do you?
No, it doesn't seem reasonable at all.
Well, that's why you need to get Mint Mobile, to be reasonable. So ditch the overpriced wireless, ditch the substandard performance and the subpar technology, and go with the real winners, the Mint Mobile. And that is at mintmobile.com/JCE is how you get that $15 a month deal. 3 months, $45, $15 a month, mintmobile.com/JCE. And then, boy, just sit back and start texting people. Just text them just send them pictures.
No, we've discussed this. Do not just randomly send people stuff.
No, just send everybody shit. It's free.
Exactly, no. You could stop with no.
Send some guy down the street a picture of your backyard.
Why?
It won't cost you anything, and maybe he'll get jealous. Well, that son of a bitch has a better-looking backyard than I do.
Then you start problems. Again, that doesn't help anyone. Mind your own business, folks, with a good phone plan.
If that surly son of a bitch walks down the street, then you can use the Mint Mobile phone plan to call the police to have him locked up. See?
Well, what if
Didn't think about that, did you?
What if he's got a pretty quick surly strut?
Well, in that case, dial 911. Because that's free, too, at Mint Mobile.
What if he does the surly shuffle?
Well, then just beat him in the head with the phone and call it a day.
But even if you do that, you'd still have the great phone plan.
You'd still have the great phone plan, just a phone with a dent in it. So anyway, nevertheless, folks, go right now to mintmobile.com/JCE for all of your mobile phone needs, your unlimited plan where you can do anything unlimitedly. You'll have no limits put on you. You'll be one of the no-limit soldiers. mintmobile.com/JCE. Of course, a $45 upfront payment is required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 GB on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. And then start texting people at random. Go to Kroger. Ask people that are shopping.
No, don't do any of
what
this.
Their phone number
except
is.
Get the phone plan.
Well, to ask them what their phone number is, tell them, it's free for you to send text and pictures and things like that to people. So you want to send them some pictures of your grandkids. And they'll give you their phone numbers, and you can do that.
No, this is all ill-advised. Ladies and gentlemen, get a great phone plan. Talk to your friends, your family. Make new friends the old-fashioned way. And don't bomb anyone with stuff that they don't want on their text message page. Whatever the hell. Don't do it. Only thing you should do is get Mint Mobile one more time without any added, no opinion, no conjecture, just the news. What's that promo code, Jim?
And no paywall. MintMobile.com/JCE.